We've been going through our series, If, this last month, actually. And we've been talking about all those things we say if only about. All right? They're often the same things we tend to make resolutions about, and we say, if only I had this thing, or if only I had that thing, if only my life was more like this, then everything would be good. The bad would be erased, the good would be restored, happy times would last. All right? The world would be like it was meant to be. All right? And we walked through a number of them, and we talked the first week that if only I was in shape, if only I was loved. The second week, if only I had enough money or more money. All right, and then last week, Len shared with you, if only I had the perfect family or a better family. Right? If only my family did what they were supposed to do. Right? And if they were what they were supposed to be. Right? And we talked through this series that all these things we say if only about in our heart of hearts are often things that become idols in our hearts. And an idol isn't, again, a statue. It isn't a depiction of a god necessarily, though that word can describe that. But ultimately, an idol is anything that captures your imagination and affection so much that it takes the place of God functionally in your heart. Right? It's taking a good thing and making it an ultimate thing or a God thing. It's taking something out of its proper place and putting it in the place that only God deserves to be in our life. And we've talked about, one of the easy ways to know if something's an idol in your life is if it's taken away from you. You suddenly can't function anymore, or you get angry, or you get resentful. All right? In fact, this happened to me just this last week. All right? It was crazy. I didn't even know what was going on. I was talking to somebody about one issue. I was trying to help them. I called them because I wanted to help heal something that was broken in their lives. And in the midst of it, I realized that my words were causing a bad reaction in the other person. And I realized that I was being maybe stern and being just a little bit rigid. And I realized after it, and it took me a couple days to say, what was going on there? Like, I called to help this person, and what was happening? I couldn't seem to stop myself, and I realized that in this person's problem, that an idol that I hold dear, an idol of success, an idol of reputation, was threatened. And really an idol of comfort. Because in that moment, I just didn't want to deal with it. And what's interesting about idols is sometimes you think they're dead. Sometimes you think those statues are shattered on the floor. They're in dust. And you think, I don't have problems with this anymore. I've acknowledged that this is an issue in my life. I've moved on with it. I've put up the proper safeguards in my heart. It's not going to be a problem anymore. And then it just seems like a weed in the garden that you didn't get the roots of it, and it just comes up right again. Right? And you don't realize what's happening until it's starting to choke you out. Right? And that's what's so insidious about the human heart, is that our idolatry is at the very core of who we are. Right? And we can't dig it out. Not completely. And only Jesus can ultimately deal with them. And he may give you freedom in this life from something that you've always idolized, but chances are you'll struggle with it until he comes and he makes all things new. Right? And then that day is when we'll have that true freedom. But we've talked about the idols of shape, the idol of money, the idol of love, the idol of family. Today we're going to talk about this other idol, this other if only. Right? If only I had a good reputation. If only I had success. Right? I think those two go together. Success and reputation are hand in hand in most cases in the world. right? And a lot of times you think you have a bad reputation because you failed at something. So do I, right? But when you're accomplishing something, you think everybody's going to look on you better, right? So they're linked. They're very close together. And maybe a guy that will really help us to dig into this idol of reputation or success is a man named Naaman. If you turn to 2 Kings 5, hopefully you're there. Awesome, we got it up top. We're going to look at verse 1 here. It says, the king of Aram had great admiration for Naaman, the commander of his army, because through him the Lord had given Aram great victories. But though Naaman was a mighty warrior, he suffered from leprosy. So, what do we know about Naaman from this passage? What's his life like? Yeah. He must have a fairly good reputation, right? He's admired. He's admired by who? A king, right? The king of Aram or the king of Syria, right? A big country, a powerful country in these days, right? What else do you see about Naaman? He's a fighter, right? He's a mighty warrior. There's not too many people who are labeled mighty warriors in the Old Testament, right? He's one of them. Yeah. What else? Yeah, he's got success all over him, right? He's the commander of the army, right? He's the general. He's a 5-star general and the top one of the country, right? Yeah. Anything else you see there? Leprosy. Yeah. Yeah, that word leprosy in the days of Naaman had the same feeling when mentioned about you as you'd have when you heard the word cancer. Right? It was the disease you did not want to get. Right? The word leprosy describes a bunch of different skin conditions, but kind of the one that was the worst, and the one that really everyone feared, the one that they feared maybe their skin conditions might develop into, was a disease that would cause you to lose sensation, cause your nerves to stop working the way that they should. So in essence, if you hurt yourself, if you injured yourself, you wouldn't realize it. Pain's a blessing in a way, because it's supposed to be a sign that something's wrong, right? And when you can't feel pain, you don't know something's wrong. You don't know you have an issue to deal with, right? And so somebody with leprosy couldn't feel pain, and they'd hurt themselves. They'd stub a toe, they'd twist an ankle, then they'd keep walking on it. Things would get worse and worse, right? And then pretty soon, what would happen eventually is like fingers, toes, nose, ears would get so damaged that they'd become infected. They'd rot away on the person, and they'd just fall off one day, right? Not a good disease, right? And this is a disease that this man has. And maybe because he's a general, he's able to still hold his position because he can shout orders to somebody who he can still kind of quarantine himself. He's not within the ranks of the soldiers. But he has wealth. He has athletic prowess, right? You don't get to be a general in those days just by strategy. You're a mighty warrior, You're at the top of your game in terms of fitness and ability, right? And he's madly popular that even the king is giving recommendations to this guy. Right? But behind it, his life is falling apart. Literally, his body's going to fall apart. Right? And what's interesting is he has everything that we often go after when we feel like our life is falling apart. He has everything that we tend to use to cover up the brokenness that we feel inside. Right? We pursue success. We pursue a reputation because we hope it will cover up the mess of who we are. Right? We desperately want to prove ourselves so that others will give us full approval. So, in a way, we want to be so successful. Deep down, we want to be so successful that we taste a sense of immortality. That what we've done's mattered and will live on after us. We want to be successful so that we can, be made right with God. So we could stand before God and say, yep, I deserve to come into your presence. I deserve this heaven. I deserve your approval. And so through our success, through our reputation, we want to prove ourselves to others, to ourselves, and to God. Right? And in a way, through our success, we either intend to, or we end up thinking almost like we can become God-like. Because we take that position of being at the top, being in the center. You see, we've been talking about a lot of idols the last month, right? The idol of shape, the idol of family, of love, of money, right? And we could have gone on for the next 10 months talking about different things that we idolize, different things we cling to. And we could have gotten very specific in all of them. But the issue isn't that we all worship these different things. The issue is that we worship one thing, and it's not God. The one thing we worship is ourselves. And so the idol beneath every single idol is the idol of self. Right? And if idolatry is a good thing that becomes a God thing, if it's taking something out of its proper place and putting it in the place of God, isn't that what happens in the beginning? When everything's perfect, when we're made in the image of God, when we're very good and there's no flaws in us, and the enemy comes in and says, no, you've got something wrong with you still. You need more. You need to manage good and evil. You need to be your own God like I am. And they end up taking the fruit, and they disobey God, and the enemy's lie is like, your eyes will be open and you will be like God. And that's what they do. They try to stand into the place of God, and in doing so, they lose what made them like God in the first place. They lose their perfection. Right? They're utterly broken. They hide in shame. Right? In that moment of believing the lie, they thought that they were somehow less than perfect, and they needed to be more. But in the moment after following through with that lie and letting it rule their lives, right, they realized that they were utterly broken. They utterly had fallen short of perfection. And they went from the perfect to the imperfect, right? Pain, suffering, insecurity, death, all just avalanched into the created order, into human life. And ever since then, there's been like this crazed desire in us to pretend that it hasn't happened, to pretend that this isn't the reality in us, to build a beautiful facade around the rotting corpses that we are, right? And that's what Jesus how he explains the way the Pharisees were acting in his days, right? He said, "You're whitewashed tombs." Because you paint yourself so pretty on the outside, but inside you're death. And we have the tendency to want to do that too. right? To put makeup on the corpse, to make it look like we're alive and we're well, to make it look like there's no problems. Just say, hey, I deserve life. I'm living. I'm good. I'm perfect. There's nothing wrong here. There's no wrinkles, cracks, or crevices in my heart or my soul. And we try to hide it. And we try to prove ourselves and to ourselves and to others and to God that we're okay. Right? And some people do a really good job at this. Right? And some people, it seems like they can't help but do a good job at it because for some reason it seems like they have less of the curse sitting on them in some area of their lives because they're so gifted. And you know those people, like, you know, every generation there's people who it just seems like everything they touch is gold. Like they are gifted beyond measure. You know, like Thomas Edison, like Ben Franklin, like Michael Jordan. You know, when you think about him, you know, the athletic ability. Right? Air Jordan. I was listening to, I looked it up on YouTube yesterday. Remember the old Gatorade commercial, I want to be like Mike? That was big. I remember dancing around to it in my living room and pretending that I didn't have torsion coordination, you know, but better, better athletic ability. Right? And I didn't even like basketball. I played basketball for our small school because they needed me to fill a team and because I was like a head above everybody else in terms of height. So I could stand there and it made up for my, you know, inability to run down the court and back without, you know, being, you know, give me a minute, you know, kind of exhaustion, right? But I still had a Michael Jordan poster on my wall, right? He defied gravity. Just seemed to be like, okay, I'm going to float across the room now. And just amazing. And as I was looking into this idol of success and reputation, I ran across an article about Michael Jordan from a couple years ago, 2013, when he was nearing his 50th birthday. And the author said, yeah, this is going to shock those of you guys who grew up in the 80s and 90s. But Michael Jordan is 50. And fascinating article. And this guy's just spending time with Michael and just seeing how sad he is, in a way. And he's got all this success. He's got all these important people around him. He's the head of a $1 billion line at Nike, the Air Jordans, as well as owning, which team does he own? I don't even know. What? Washington Wizards? Yeah. And then he's got another company on the side. On the side, right? Right? The dude has everything. And as he was talking about like when he was playing ball, like every guy who came in that had skill, like it drove him to prove himself, that he was better than that guy. Whenever there was a critic who spoke, he listened. He just tuned right in because he wanted to see what that critic was saying, and he wanted to prove him wrong on the court. And you know, through his success, right, he found meaning and purpose in life. And the author of this article was saying, you know, now that he doesn't have that, he seems listless. He seems like he's a boat floating without the motor. Right? You know, this God unable to fly anymore. Right? What's the purpose? And he's dreaming about going back into basketball still. Right? But even that dream will fade. He even talked about like I never thought I'd die, I'd grow old. I thought I'd die young. Like a tragedy fit for like the ages rather than a godlike figure's knees going bad and back getting worse and slowly failing and fading and succumbing to the sands of time. But we yearn for what he has or what he had. We yearn for success. Yeah, none of us hardly, unless you're delusional, think you're probably going to make that level of success as the greatest of all time in some area of expertise, but we all want that. And when I was reading this article, I was really thinking, this is Naaman. He's at the top of his game. Right, Jordan said, I can't remember the last time I wasn't the most important person in a room. He's been in rooms with presidents of the United States, and they still, kind of bow to Jordan. Even when he's overseas and his security forces talk about him, his code name is Yahweh. And if you don't know, Yahweh is the Old Testament name for God. What does that do to a person with all that fame and accolades? But it's what we want. And whether we're at the top of our game or not, it's what we think we deserve in many ways. And that's where Naaman's at. Let's look at verse 2. It says, at that time, Armenian, there we go. You think I should have known that. Aramean raiders had invaded the land of Israel, and among their captives was a young girl who had been given to Naaman's wife as a maid. One day the girl said to her mistress, I wish my master would go to see the prophet in Samaria. He would heal him of his leprosy. And so Naaman told the king that the young girl from Israel had said, go and visit the prophet. The king of Aram told him, I will send a letter of instruction for you to take to the king of Israel. And so Naaman started out carrying as gifts 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter to the king of Israel said, with this letter I present my servant Naaman. I want you to heal him of his leprosy. What surprises you from that? What sticks out? What shocks you or amazes you? Yeah, he's thinking he has to bring all these gifts to be healed. Yeah, they're big gifts too. Yeah. Anything else? He listened to the word of a little girl. What does that say about Naaman? He's desperate. Right? He doesn't show it to anybody else, but deep down he's desperate. Deep down, he knows he needs help. And I think that's all of us. Doesn't matter how successful you are, doesn't matter how perfect life is. Deep down, you know that there's a countdown. You know that the clock's ticking down and you're not going to last. Deep down, you know that you're imperfect and you're broken and you're in desperate need of help. But most people, the moment that starts springing up, they say, okay, let's get that out of the way. Let's cover it up with busyness. Let's cover it up with sex or pleasure. Let's cover it up with entertainment. Let's cover it up with success. Right? And they try to hide it. Looking at this, what is Naaman looking to save him? What's he trusting in? Gold and silver. Right? Anything else?
He was counting on, the servant girl had said anything about this had to be arranged between two kings. But, it's like the king of Naaman just automatically, immediately, well, let's just bypass this little prophet here, and then let's go to the house.
Yeah, it's interesting. He doesn't go to the prophet, but he goes to the king of Israel, or the king of Samaria. All right, what's interesting, he bypasses and goes right to the top. He's counting in his status, right? It's interesting. He thinks the money, the possessions, the recommendations, his name will all save him. Anything else that you think he's trusting in? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he just gives a command to be healed. Right? And he comes with it. I want you to heal this guy. Interesting. Yeah.
Back then, a lot of kings were considered to be God, like
Hmm.
their divine status.
Yeah.
So he's coming in to the king, like, if you're so divine, you should be able to heal them.
Okay. Yeah. In these ancient days, a lot of kings have a divine sense to them. Some of them are considered gods, like the god of, or the Pharaoh of Egypt, right? And other rulers, they really believe that they're there by God's divine right, in many ways, right? What's interesting is he's coming to the king of Israel, expecting the God of Israel to act just like the God of any other nation. Because in any other nation, the gods there kind of serve as a social control, right? And they work under the realm of religion, which says, if you perform, if you do well enough, if you accomplish something, God will bless you. God will reward you. God will give you what you want. But that's not the way that it works with the God of this universe, with the creator of all things. Right? No one can put him in their debt by their goodness or their performance. And that's what Nahum's expecting. That's what the king of Aram is expecting. That, well, you're the head of the nation, so you're the head of the nation's religion. You're the most successful person here, so you must be the most closest to God. And so make this happen. And what's interesting, if you look at verse 7, it's when the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes in dismay. He ripped them apart, which is like the deepest sign of sorrow over something. And he says, "This man sends me a leper to heal? Am I God that I can give life and take it away?" I can see that he's just trying to pick a fight with me. And so you see that the king at least gets part of this, right? No man, no matter how successful or no matter how powerful he is able to kill and make alive. They're not able to do what only God can do, even though we often trust in many things to do just that, to give us life. Look at verses 8 through 10 here. It says, "But when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes in dismay, he sent this message to him. 'Why are you so upset? Send Naaman to me, and he will learn that there is a true prophet here in Israel.' So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and waited at the door of Elisha's house. But Elisha sent a messenger to him with this message: 'Go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River. Then your skin will be restored, and you will be healed of your leprosy.'" So, just think about this scene. Here comes the captain, the general of a foreign army with his full entourage, with just wagons full of gold and silver and like 10 sets of the finest clothes that these people had probably ever seen outside of what the king has worn. Right? And he probably shows up at this little house in this backwater area. Probably has some trumpets blasting at his arrival. A herald calling for Elisha to come out, and he has to wait. Elisha doesn't show. Right? And you see, Nahum showed up and thought that Elisha would be running out to this great man to give him what he wanted, to honor him, maybe to take his money, right? or give him something really big to accomplish to prove himself successful and good enough for the healing. But that's not what's happening. Right? How is Naaman's idol of success and reputation being torn down? He's Yeah, yeah. Yeah, he's Naaman isn't being welcomed as a foreign dignitary. The people of the house don't come out and bow down to him, right? They don't welcome him with accolades and praises. But in a way, he's treated less than the courtesy that Elisha probably would have shown his neighbor, who probably was a peasant and didn't have much. Right? Anything else? Yeah, Melody.
Lepers were usually outcasts, and that's why he was being treated as a leper instead of
Yeah, so lepers are usually outcasts, right? And that's kind of what he's being treated as. An outcast, one who's separated from society and their loved ones. Right? Anything else?
I kind of wonder if he believed that that could possibly happen because he's so desperate and went to the river 7 times. That I'm sure there were lepers in Israel too, and so why would this work for him? That just sounds possible.
Yeah. So, well, we'll get to that in a moment. We haven't gotten to his answer yet. You read ahead. Oh, you read ahead of before. Okay, yeah. But you see, like by one, like his idols just being chipped at and broken down, right? And you see this happens long before he even comes to Israel, right? Because he's inflicted with this disease, right? And this disease is really a gift. And we don't often think about it that way, but the hardships of life are often a gift because it shows that thing sitting at the top, that idol that we put in God's place, won't save us. It shows that we're not impervious, that we're not immortal, that we're not infallible. And so, like right away, right, he gets leprosy. He knows he needs help. Right? He's turned away by this successful king that he thought would save him because of his success. Right? Elisha doesn't even come out to see him. And then he doesn't give him any way to take credit either, when you think about it. Well, I guess, I'm sorry, Jan, he did say to wash in the Jordan. I didn't remember we read that. Right? He says, just wash in the Jordan. Right? He didn't say get the broom of the wicked witch of the west. He didn't say, bring this ring, the ring of power, to Mount Doom and destroy it. Right? He doesn't send him on a crusade, but he says just wash. And he sends a servant to him. He sends a nobody to him. All right. And let's look at these next few verses real quick. But Naaman became angry. You see, this is what happens when our idol is threatened. We often become angry. And he stalked away. I thought he would certainly come out to meet me, he said. I expected him to wave his hand over my leprosy and call on the name of the Lord his God and heal me. Aren't the rivers of Damascus and Abana and the Pharpar better than all the rivers of Israel? Why shouldn't I wash in them and be healed? So Naaman turned and went away angry, or went away in a rage, right? And he's like, I didn't come on this crusade to this land. I didn't venture into enemy territory. just so I could wash in a dirty river. That's not a worthy quest of my greatness. But his officers tried to reason with him and said, Sir, if the prophet had told you to do something very difficult, wouldn't you have done it? So you should certainly obey him when he says, simply go and wash and be cured. And so Nahum went down to the Jordan River and dipped himself 7 times, as the man of God had instructed him, and his skin became as healthy as the skin of a young child's, and he was healed. See, what's interesting after this, he tries to pay Elisha back. You see, he thinks from the very beginning that his success, that his reputation, that his goodness, that everything he accomplished will save him. And he brings I have no idea how much gold really weighs because I've only held a ring or an earring of it, But I hear it's heavy. But still, when you're talking those poundage, you think that's probably a lot. All right? It could make Elisha set for life. All right? Move out of the sty that he's in and move into a nice place. Right? And he's bringing riches, bringing accolades of a king. Right? And he thinks all of this is going to save him. And what you see is he ends up being enslaved to this stuff. And he desperately runs from one thing to another, hoping that it's going to save him. You don't want the money? How about the clothes? All right, how about a recommendation? How about a mighty quest? What can I do? He's desperate. And when he hears all he has to do is wash, he's so enslaved to his idol of success that he can't bring himself to do it. And he needs somebody to slap him a few times and be like, wake up, you idiot. If it's that simple, do it. You don't have to do anything. Stop being so proud. Stop thinking that it all depends on you. Stop thinking that you're so good that you can't take a handout. Because the God of Israel wants to give you life. Take it. And don't be too proud not to. And you see what happens is freedom comes when you realize that nothing else that you've looked to will save you. Freedom comes for Nahum when he realizes that the money, that the success, that the stuff, that the abilities, that the situations that brought him all those things all came from God and aren't God themselves. They aren't the Savior. Right? You look at the beginning of the story, God's the one who gave him the success. Right? Everything else came from God. And Nahum finds freedom when he says, okay, all that other good stuff that we have in life can't save me. I'm going to take it out of its place of the ultimate thing and put God back in the proper place. Right? But you see that it's still a journey, right? Because after this, what happens is he washes, he's cleaned, and he comes back to Elisha and he says, hey, now take the money in the coat, says Thanksgiving. Let me pay you back. All right? And some of you guys might be like, never wanting to take anything. Right? Somebody does something for you, they give you a gift, they pay for your dinner, and you're like shoving money into their pockets. Well, I've got to pay you back because I can't be in your debt. I can't live with myself if I've got to depend on somebody else to take care of me. I was like that for a long time. My siblings had borrowed money from my parents, had been given money from my parents for a number of things when I was younger, and I was real proud. I didn't need that. Didn't need anybody's help. Didn't need anyone to tell me what was right or wrong because my life was perfect. Right? And that was a lie, by the way. I told myself. But eventually, God ended up hurting my back, or allowing it to happen. And I became to a point where I said, okay, Dad, Mom, I need your help. In fact, it was the beginning of me saying, God, I need your help. And what brought me back to faith through grace. But you see, this is the final death of Nahum's idol. I'll let you read the ending on your own. But he tries to pay him back, and Elisha wouldn't take it. He wouldn't take any payment. And then what Nahum realized is that he couldn't settle accounts with God. He couldn't put God in his debt through his success. In fact, in order to have life, he would have to be in God's debt. That's okay. He had to be in God's love and grace and mercy, and that's all right. And right after that, when the payment is rejected, when he's saying there's no way you can pay God back for this. In fact, I wouldn't let you even try because you'd go back to your idol of success again. Then you see Nahum saying, I now realize that there's no God but the God of Israel. Right? He comes to a place of true worship. And he even says, can I just take back a couple of carts fulls of the dirt from this holy ground? So that when I pray, I'm connected to the land of where I got my healing from. I'm connected to the God that where I experienced, or the place where I experienced the Creator of the universe. And he was probably bringing this back actually to create an altar, because you see throughout the Old Testament when God shows up, people often take stones or stuff and make an altar there to remember the Lord and to remember always what God had done for them. And he's like, man, I'm bought in. And he even says, because I'm the general, I go with the king into the foreign god's temple, the god of Aram's temple. And when he bows, because he's old, I've got to bow with him to hold him up. Please forgive me for that, because I'm only worshiping one guy from now on. It's the God of Israel, right? It changes his life. And Elisha says, go in peace. And Nahum has full peace. Peace that comes only when our idol is identified and dethroned from the place of God, and when we see that Jesus is better than anything and everything that we've looked to in his place. See, God is gracious. He knows that you wanted to be like him. He knows that you're desperate to prove yourself to be like him. And he knows how cracked and broken and damaged you are. He knows how much of a mess you are. But he wants to love us. And he wants to deal with us with grace. And he gives us forgiveness. And the thing about forgiveness, whenever forgiveness is in the Bible, it's always free, but it's always very costly. Right? It's always a free gift, but it always costs somebody greatly. Right? And when you forgive, you have a chance to either, when someone wrongs you, you have a chance to either make them pay for their wrong, or you have the opportunity to absorb the cost of that wrong and bless the person who wronged you by not revisiting the pain or the cost that was visited on you. Right? And that's what God does for us through Jesus. Right? Who is the picture of Jesus in this story? Right? Who is the hero of this story? Who's kind of pointing to Jesus and his forgiveness? Elisha? Good guess. It's a little girl. Yeah, I mean, think about the little girl. You know, she shows up in like one or two lines. This little girl has been, her land has been invaded. Her town where she grew up was probably destroyed. Her family was either killed in front of her or enslaved, and now she's a slave as well. And it's all because of Nahum, the commander, the general of the army that destroyed her life, that waged war against her, even though she had done nothing to him. Right? And when Nahum got leprosy, she could have easily said, I'm going to watch this villain rot before me, and when he's dead, I'll be free. But you see that she's full of compassion and mercy herself, and she says, I wish my master would go to see the prophet. If only he'd do it. Right? She is desperate for him to be healed. Despite all that was done for her, he doesn't wait for her to be too weak or too broken to try to escape. She doesn't take advantage of the opportunity and seek revenge, but she absorbs the cost and seeks her enemy's good. And it really points forward to Jesus, the suffering servant, right, who left all the goodness of his Father's house willingly, right, came into this world, lived a hard, difficult life, was rejected by people, was captured, was beaten, enslaved, killed, and died a criminal's death. You see, our problem comes because we take ourselves out of our proper place and put ourselves in God's place. That's where all our idolatry comes from, all our sin comes from. But the answer to that, in God's glorious mind, was I'll take myself out of my proper place and I'll come into yours. And he experiences everything that our rebellion deserves. And he frees us. He absorbs the cost of us warring against him so we can have life when we were only headed towards death. If this is true, what's the implications of it for our lives? If we live on our high horse of our accomplishments, right, we're not getting anywhere. Okay, if we live in God's ways, right, he'll bless us, ultimately with life, right, not necessarily with things. But anything else, what's the implications? Yeah, isn't it awesome? No matter what the circumstances, God can use us to bring others to him, even if life sucks beyond all measure. Right? I'm a slave and my family's been killed. Right? None of you guys are in that situation unless you just haven't told me something really big about your life. Right? But if God can use that situation, think what he could do through you. Amazing. Anything else? Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I think Martin Luther said that, right? He purchased and won us. Jesus purchased and won us not with gold or silver, but with his precious blood. Or maybe that's Peter. Maybe I'm just accrediting that to Luther. Is it Peter or Luther, Len? Luther said it as well. So, a couple good guys might have said it. Yeah. Carolyn, last one. He has a plan. Yeah. I'll add a couple to them, and maybe you guys haven't dwelled on this enough as I have, as I've been thinking about this and preaching through idolatry. But we've got to dig for our idols, to figure out where they are in our lives. Right? None of us can afford to say that we don't have something in the place of God in our hearts. And we've got to be willing to look for them and search them out and talk to the people who know us and say, hey, where do you think I'm looking to something to do what only God can do? What am I trusting in besides God to make me whole and to give me joy and to make my life complete? What do you see in my life that seems to make me angry or just shake me to the core when I lose it or when things don't go my way? Because those are all signposts that we were trying to desperately hold on to an idol and it didn't deliver for us. And so we've got to be honest with ourselves, and we have to ask others to be honest with us. And we have to be willing to let others speak into our lives. It's not easy. I tell you guys to do that to me all the time. Few of you do. But especially in Bible studies and such, I'm like, dude, tell me if I'm doing something wrong or if it looks like I'm trusting in something other than Jesus. But when you do, part of me takes out a couple shields for a moment, right? And I don't want to hear it. But then I go, yeah, okay, I do need to hear this. We need to see where our idols are so that they can be dethroned and so Jesus can be put in that proper place. So we can experience full freedom and peace. All right. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for loving us. That while we idolize so many things, while we look to so many things besides you, Lord, you are so good. That you come into our lives. Lord, help us to remember that when we're experiencing difficulties and sadness, when things don't go the way that they should be, those are often the very moments that you've set up so that we could see what we were looking to as God isn't. So we'd be free from our idols and we would turn to you. Lord, help us to be people who inspect our hearts. People who look very closely at ourselves and say, is it fame? Is it my body? Is it my family? Is it my job? Is it my pleasure? Is it something else that I'm looking to? And would you free us, Lord? Father, thank you so much for sending the rescuer Jesus into our hearts, for serving us, for absorbing our cost. Help us to be filled with joy and see that since you are gracious, we don't have to prove ourselves and we can let go of the imperfection of who we are. We could let go of the desire to hide the mess that we are because, Lord, you allowed Jesus to become the mess that we are on the cross. Because of him, we are free and forgiven and can have peace. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for giving us Jesus. In his name we pray. Amen.